Let's talk about some of these failures, because the failure is all over the place. The stench of our elite failure is all over the place. Let's begin with Liz Cheney, who lost her primary in Wisconsin by like a record number. She got very few votes. She was tossed out, ending the Cheney, the history of Cheneys in politics, of the Bushes in politics. This is after she, of course, appeared in the show trial of January 6th that the Democrats were holding, which was just an embarrassment. It was an embarrassment. It was a trial with no defense. That's an embarrassment per se. That's a violation per se. As I keep saying, you do not even report on a trial that has no defense, because you start to think, well, this is some kind of information, but it's not. If there's no defense, there's no information. She lost by a historic margin. Candidate Trump-backed Harriet Hagman took 66.3% of the vote to Cheney's 28.9%. Now, talking about people who are completely detached from reality, who are doubling down on what they're doing, even as it fails, here's what Liz Cheney said. This is cut 17.
The great and original champion of our party, Abraham Lincoln, was defeated in elections for the Senate and the House before he won the most important election of all. Lincoln ultimately prevailed, he saved our Union, and he defined our obligation as Americans for all of history. Speaking at Gettysburg of the great task remaining before us, Lincoln said that we here highly resolve that these dead shall not have died in vain, that this nation, under God, shall have a new birth of freedom, and that government of the people, by the people, and for the people shall not perish from this earth.
Yeah, he did say that. That's true about Abraham Lincoln, so she got that part right. When I heard this, I tweeted, I knew Abe Lincoln. Abe Lincoln was a friend of mine, Congresswoman, you know Abe Lincoln. But first of all, Abraham Lincoln lost his race while winning the popular vote, and she got a historically low vote. But he was also a great man, and Liz Cheney, not so much. She could have opposed Trump. She could have said that Trump was wrong about the election being stolen. Other people have said that. But she joined with the Democrats in waging a campaign intended to demonize all Republicans. Now, I want to get her failure exactly right, because people call her a rhino and all, and in some ways she was a bad congresswoman in that she doesn't really care about Wyoming. She'd rather be in the Beltway than in Wyoming. But you can't call her a rhino. Her votes were pretty conservative. What she was someone who would not acknowledge the failure of the GOP establishment, which is, again, a theoretical failure, not paying attention to real people in real life. The John McCains, the Mitt Romneys, the George W's, they're not bad people. You don't have to hate them. It has nothing to do with that. They weren't addressing the issue, which is simply this. The culture has been battering ordinary Americans, telling them their country stinks, their country's racist, they're homophobic, their God doesn't exist, everything they do is they're stupid, they're deplorable, all this stuff, while the government grows and grows and grows and does its job more and more badly and takes away more and more of our freedoms. And basically, the Republicans just kept saying, well, we'll cut taxes. We'll cut taxes. Capitalism, capitalism, capitalism. Teachers are coming into our schools and teaching our children that they're the wrong sex. Well, capitalism. They just weren't listening. When you run a John McCain, when you run a Jeb Bush, you're not paying attention to what the people want, what they're thinking about. And now Donald Trump has turned that around, and that's what they're fighting against. They're not fighting against Donald Trump. They're fighting against a party that has changed because it wasn't answering the needs of its voters. So the DOJ, this is all part of what's happening with the DOJ, right? There are threats of violence against the FBI now because of their raid on Mar-a-Lago. And I am deeply, deeply opposed to threatening anybody to any kind of political violence. But they must have known. They acted recklessly. They must have known that some of this was going to happen. And it gets worse when the media, whose job it is to question the government. That's their job. It is to say, well, wait a minute, this hasn't happened for 232 years. Was it a mistake to change? And instead we got this. This is cut number 1.
The FBI is a conservative-leaning law enforcement organization, and we've sort of lost the thread on that in the past 6 years.
These attacks against the FBI, these attacks against the most important federal law enforcement agency
less
in
than
America?
24 hours after a peaceful search that they gave them a heads up on.
Peaceful search.
It's all legal. It's all lawful. It's not a raid. They didn't, they're not there improperly or unlawfully.
The Justice Department is returning to its historical position as a law enforcement agency above politics, trying to do the right thing.
I don't think there was any politics involved.
This appears to be a nonpartisan process.
Because anybody on this set had done the same thing, the exact same result would have occurred.
A judge would not sign off on that if there were not evidence.
Sources tell me that, there's a reason they wouldn't go in there if it wasn't really significant, if they weren't really concerned about the nature of the classified information that Trump had, what he might be doing with it, who he might be showing it to.
Nothing to see here. Nothing to see here. This is the job of journalism, to tell you that your government is doing a great job, and a judge would never sign off. The DOJ, the FBI would never phony up information to get a FISA warrant to tap an American citizen. They would never do anything like that. They would never lie to Donald Trump and tell him he's not under investigation when he was. They'd never brief Obama, but not brief. They did all these things. There's every reason to suspect them. It's almost as if they're trying to incite violence so that they can then condemn all Republicans as terrorists. In fact, James O'Keefe over at Project Veritas says he's got a document that was sent out by the DOJ. Well, I'll play him talking about it. He says he's got a Homeland Security bulletin to local law enforcement that conflates people who suspect the election wasn't fair with terrorists. This is James O'Keefe, cut 3.
Breaking news, a source within the Department of Homeland Security has leaked to us an intelligence bulletin marked for official use only unclassified in light of the FBI raid on President Trump. This document, dated August 12th, refers to a heightened threat from what the Department of Homeland Security calls DVEs, or domestic violent extremists, quote, motivated by a range of ideologies who have grievances against a variety of targets, including law enforcement. Domestic violent extremists are referred to in one of these paragraphs as, quote, many of these threats include references to the perception that the 2020 presidential election was fraudulent and other claims of government overreach. The 2022 midterms in this document are also highlighted as a potential, quote, flashpoint for this violent extremism.
So this is a failure of our media, which has become a tool of the regime, a failure of the regime, a failure of the DOJ to maintain its integrity, which it has had for so long. The FBI has had respect from people for so long, but because they've acted fairly honestly, they're not acting honestly anymore. They're not acting in a straightforward way. And if that's not true, why is Jim Jordan, Congressman Jim Jordan, why is he getting whistleblowers coming in and telling him that something has gone terribly wrong? Here's Jordan.
The template never changes with these guys. It's the left creates a lie, big media, mainstream press reports the lie, big tech amplifies the lie, and then when we try to tell the truth, they call us names and try to cancel us and tell the world that, oh, we're the ones not being square with them. So the country, though, the good news is they figured it out, and I'll tell you who else has figured it out, Trey. And you and John, with your background in law enforcement, appreciate this. 14 FBI agents have come to our office as whistleblowers, and they are good people. There are lots of good people in the FBI. It's the top that's the problem. But some of these good agents are coming to us telling us this is baloney what's going on, the political nature now of the Justice Department. God bless them for doing it, coming and talking to us about the school board issue, about a whole host of issues. I mean, it's becoming a well-worn trail of agents who say this has got to stop. And thank goodness for them, and thank goodness that the American people recognizes it, and I believe they're going to make a big change on November 8th.
You know, the CDC, another failure, right? They failed during the pandemic. Rochelle Walensky, running the CDC, came out and sent a video to her employees saying, we had decades, I think 75 years, to prepare for this, and then we blew it. We did a terrible, terrible job. So what do you think her recommendation would be? You'd think it would be maybe we should do less. Maybe we were overbearing. Maybe we pretended we had information we didn't have. No, she wants to be more active, and we want to pay more attention to equity. We want to go back into the pornography of theory because because we're failing in real life. Like the guy who can't do it with a girl because he's reading pornography. So now he's going to go back and double down on the pornography. They're going to double down on their theoretical ideas. Fauci, the guy who is just like a bumbling idiot. He's one of those wind-up toys that keeps walking to the corner, keeps lying and all this. And he said, we should have been much more stringent in our lockdowns, much more stringent in our lockdowns. So here, let's just hear from Rand Paul, because he gets it right. Let's hear what he had to say.
It wasn't that they acted too sparingly. The problem was that they acted too quickly and not based on science. It wasn't that they were, waiting around for science. They were reacting every week with a new edict that contradicted the previous week's edict. They also commissioned studies that completely dismissed the idea that you got immunity from COVID after having had it. So how can you do a study of whether a vaccine or a booster works if an arm of the study is not people who have actually already had the disease? If you discount having the disease, most of the studies are worthless. So what I would suggest, if they want to reorganize, is humility. I think they need to step back and get back into the advice game, not the mandate game.
Okay, humility. Humility is what you have when you make a mistake and you admit that you made a mistake. Here is Fauci talking about himself. I can't remember if I played this clip before, but it's worth playing again. Is Fauci giving an interview, and he's talking about what's called the Fauci effect, which is what he says that people are going to medical school because of him. This is an amazing clip, and if you're not watching this, if you're just listening to it, see if you can find it and just look at the man, this arrogant ponce who is the opposite of humility. Cut 31.
People go to medical school now. People are interested in science. Not because of me, because most people don't know me, who I am. My friends know me, my wife knows me, but people don't know me. It's what I symbolize. And what I symbolize in an era of the normalization of untruths and lies and all the things you're seeing going on in society from January 6th to everything else that goes on, people, the craving for consistency, for integrity, for truth, and for people caring about people.
What a jerk. What an arrogant jerk he is. Their CDC failed, but the government is always the same way. They do things that make things worse, and then they say, what we need is more government. That is the effect of pornographic theory. That's the effect that you have an idea in your head. It makes your city worse. Look at George Soros coming out and saying, I'm going to keep on reforming prosecution. I'm going to keep on reforming justice, even as cities become just hellholes of crime. It's in New York, San Francisco, Philadelphia, anywhere where a Soros DA takes control, it becomes a nightmare. And yet George Soros says, yes, we need more of that. We need more of that. Well, why is that? Because Soros is sitting in his ivory tower someplace, believe me, in some tax-protected someplace, so his money isn't being taken away. And he's coming up with these theories and these ideas, just like a guy sitting in his room looking at pornography and thinking, yeah, this is what real sex is like. This is what the way real women should be treated. It's the same damn thing. It is turning people into shapes and numbers and objects instead of thinking about the fact that, no, if you leave people alone, what happens? They become creative. They do stuff. They compete with one another. The human system is made to work, except for the fact that people want to control it. And once they start to control it, they ruin it. Afghanistan, another example. What a disaster. What a disaster that was. People dying. The Taliban has now taken over after the Afghanistan. The Taliban is back in charge. They've taken away education from women. They've banned music. You have to wear beards or they come and beat the crap out of you. All the stuff that was happening before is happening again, which means it's a staging ground for terrorism, just like it was when we went in there. And even if you believed, and now the Republicans have put out a report saying that the military, that they lied to us. They told us that the military was totally on board. That's not true. The military said we should keep a small force there. We keep a small force almost everywhere. Of course, we should have kept a small force, not to keep the war going, but simply to make sure to maintain control. But no, Biden had an idea. His idea was we should get out. He got out, and he got out in the most embarrassing, humiliating way possible. Do you think Putin didn't see that when he decided whether he was going to go into Ukraine or not? Of course he did. Of course, it was a complete disaster. And Biden told us, it was an extraordinary success, another extraordinary success. One failure after another, one failure after another. All of our institutions working off theories without any regard to the lives of the human beings those theories affect. The more impotent they become, the more they turn to their theoretical porn. And that's what we're seeing. And it all goes back again to this overarching idea of materialism, which is the Marxist theory. All Marxism is materialist. That's the Marxist theory that has failed, and they keep doubling down on it, and they're done. They are done. They have failed themselves into the ground. If you like this content, and you know you did, like and subscribe to the Andrew Klavan Podcast.